Hey there, everybody. Anthony Russell, banners on the wall, back here. And we are back for a Hockey Stories interview piece, however you want to put it, because one of my big things is if I don't know something, I like to ask a ridiculous amount of questions about it. And me, being me, I am as far south as I can possibly get. If I go south, the only thing I get is wet feet. But one of the things I've noticed over the last couple of years is things are starting to tick over. The wheels are very much turning a long way north, even further north in some places than where I drove to in Dumfries back at the end of 2023. Scottish ice hockey feels like it's slowly starting to have a bit of a renaissance. And I figured, who better to chat to about this than one of the men helping lead this, what's been something like a bit of a quiet revolution. They talk about the North remembering. Well, it's time that we remember the North. As I speak to a man of many hats, Scottish Ice Hockey's Director of Hockey Operations, assistant coach of the Solway Sharks. Some people might even call him the Dumfries Del Boy after he managed to get a boat onto the ice at the Dumfries Ice Arena for that signing announcement for Craig Peacock. Jamie Thomson joins me. Jamie, thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome, Anthony. Not a problem. Thanks for the invite.
The one thing we should probably start with, and I think I'll get this off my chest right away, because let's talk about something that will kind of make both of us quite happy. Your boy, Bailey, scored some pretty important goals for Widnes at the weekend on the big pad in Nottingham. He is far too talented, far too young, and he makes me feel really old. Can he please stop?
He's making me feel old for sure, Anthony, and I'm really happy with his progress that he's made in the last couple of years, especially this year. I think he's had his best year to date, but it's probably down to Martin and the guys at Solway really looking after him since he's been a young boy. So hats off to them guys. But he's got a long way to go, but he's doing really, really well. Yeah, I'm really proud of him.
Yeah. For folk who haven't checked out Bailey's stats on Elite Prospects, do, because for someone so young, he is certainly putting in a shift on a team down in Widnes. It's had a bit of a rough year. But it's been a bit of a trend. We've seen a lot of younger players, guys. You think of like Innes Gallagher as well. He's obviously made a massive impact having come down to Leeds from Kilmarnock. But would you say there's a move towards getting more of those sort of Scottish youngsters who are kind of in that sort of in-between stage where maybe where under 18s is not right for them, junior hockey is not right for them, and maybe they are at the moment kind of a step beyond the SNL? Is that sort of move to get them sort of further south into North One, into the national division? Is that a conscious decision on player part, or is there encouragement from folk in Scotland to kind of just get them ice time in big situations in places?
Well, I think it's all kind of happened over the last 2 years. It was actually Joe Coulter that started it down in Widnes when he was still coaching there, and obviously being a Dumfries lad, and we were very close and spoke all the time. It was a conscious decision on the part of us sending 2 or 3 players there to get them as much game time as possible. There was SNL teams interested in them, but they're going to teams perhaps lower down the rankings, which allows them to play higher up the lineup. It allows them to play some special teams and just get really, really valuable minutes. And I think you mentioned Bailey, but if you look at Owen Ray and Thomas that's there, and Ross Chalmers and Conor McNulty came from that route, and Innes came from that route as well. It's paid off really well because they're now starting to rack up points and really establish themselves. Probably 2 or 3 years before they would have done that previously. So it was a conscious thing, purely about, look, everybody loves to win, but at their age, it's all about playing and getting them on the ice as much as possible. So rather than send them to Billingham, Blackburn, Hull, these kind of stronger teams, or even in Dundee Rockets, Edinburgh Capitals, these kind of teams, it made sense to send them where they are, and the teams have looked after them really, really well. And then they've had players from Kilmarnock and others follow suit now, and it's something I've been working with Martin Peters over the border really, really closely over the couple of years about having a joint partnership for all these under 23 players, and allowing them kind of free movement, if you want, to try and get more games. Even at a junior level, the only caveat we both had was that it wasn't to the detriment that somebody that had possibly been in that club for a long time. So, Solway, for example, if we had 5 witness kids playing for us, we wouldn't sit 5 Solway born and bred kids, to let these kids play. But if we were short, we would use them, and it's worked really, really well for teams both sides of the borders. And that partnership's in a really, really strong place now, Anthony. And so yeah, it's good.
Let's take people back a little bit. Let's go a bit further back in time, because we've got plenty of time to talk about the future. But I'll take you back to kind of the middle of the pandemic, and Scottish ice hockey, from my understanding, was in the position where it was prepared to come under the IHUK banner, and the unification vote comes up. It doesn't pass at what was the EIHA at the time. And obviously everybody's then forced to kind of go in their separate directions. What was Scottish ice hockey's kind of immediate sort of movements post that point? Because we've seen what's happened with the IHA, now England Ice Hockey, of course. But I think a lot of people, particularly folk kind of involved with the NIHL structure and kind of even beyond, like I say, Scottish ice hockey, of course, has this, very extremely, pretty much the similar remit to what the IHS. But people don't seem to quite know about it. So kind of take us a little bit on that journey from when the unification vote failed to kind of where we are now.
Yeah, well, there was a massive changing of the guard here up over the border. I wasn't really involved in that then. I coached for the SIH at under 17, under 18 level for about 10 years. So I was always in and about their national programme. And then at the very tail end of that kind of time, I joined the old board for a couple of months, and that didn't really work out. I kind of stepped away. And then there was a change in the guard. New chairperson came on board, a whole new board of directors. And at that point, I spoke to John Colley, who's still the chair now. And he was keen to still have me on board. And I was a bit arm's length, if I'm honest, at start, because I wasn't sure if that's still for me or whatever, And that worked out well, obviously. But I think that the main focus of us was right from day one was how to get kids on the ice more, how to raise the profile of the game overall, how to improve the standard, and our long-term plan is obviously to try and produce as many senior, semi-professional, professional players as we can, as many Great Britain players as we can. So we had to strip that right back, obviously, and have a look at, right, how do we kickstart these leagues? Are our leagues and stuff still in the correct format? What's our national programme look like? And slowly but surely, we've started to make some quite substantial changes to a lot of the formats. If I fast forward to this year, example, after this year, I've kind of took a back step from the kind of day-to-day doing everything to work with John on the more bigger picture stuff. And Murray Johnson and Tony Cairns, 2 guys, have came on board this year, and we've re-implemented buzzer hockey in our league format under 12, where teams must play 3 lines. They must get everybody on the ice. It's not about winning, it's about getting as many kids on and keeping them happy and keeping them in the game. And I have to say that the feedback on that's been really good. And we start to make these little tweaks. We've tweaked our cup format. We've tweaked our national programme. And it is all tailored around the big picture. How do we produce more homegrown players into our leagues and keep our leagues alive?
There's certainly a lot kind of going on. I don't expect an exact number off the top of your head. That would be impressive if you did. How many junior hockey players have we got in Scotland at this current point in time, roughly?
Well, a very rough number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, probably 850 to 900, I would say.
Which is a pretty impressive number, because Scotland is kind of in a similar kind of position to England. We'd love about double the amount of ice rinks we can, and there's not the space and all the money to kind of do that. So to have that, I think, if I'm honest, I think people in England might be surprised to hear that number is so high.
Yeah, look, we've got a small amount of clubs, but the clubs do a really great job at recruitment and keeping. And obviously, all clubs are run by volunteers, and the amount of work and stuff that goes in. But if I take, obviously, I know the Solway numbers right off, but if I take, so we really struggled after COVID. We probably lost 2 age groups worth of kids to other things, which is a common story throughout the UK. But they've done a great job of rebuilding that club. If I look at it from under 16s down now, we've probably got 60 to 70 kids from the age of 14 down, which is really, really healthy and something we've not had for a long, long time. So if I look at that club, and we're still seeing teams struggle at the higher age like that. Bailey's age group, actually, the under 19s is the last of that kind of COVID hangover where teams are still short. So the junior clubs, there might not be as many of them, as England, but they all do a fantastic job at developing and getting teams on the ice, and they're playing league games every week, and they're playing friendlies, and we're doing 3-on-3 tournaments, and we're like doing jamborees for smaller ones. It's really, really active up here. Really active. I mean, my friends' kids have just took up playing in the last 12 months, and I think it's been a bit of a shock to his system because he's like, he's got something on every weekend now. But it's all down to the clubs and the fact they're all working together, though. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and your friend's probably cursing the massive hole he now has in his wallet.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that's come out in the last couple of last sort of week or so is the fact that we're seeing a little bit of an increase now in the amount of women's hockey teams, certainly at a senior level as well.
Yeah.
Folk will obviously be familiar. The Solway Sharks ladies participate in the IHL structure, as do the Caledonia Steel Queens. But we've seen a new women's team come out of Dundee. We're seeing a new women's team come out of Kirkcaldy as well. Talk potentially as well of a women's team coming into Kilmarnock. There's a bit of a march on all fronts in this particular standpoint, because a lot of those elite women's players do come out of a very, very kind of, obviously the WNIHL Elite League is not there's not that many teams in the league in general, but a lot of the women's team GB players do come from a very small number of clubs. The fact that women's hockey is starting to sort of rise up in Scotland a little bit can only bode well going forward, because there's some very talented players on both the Sharks and the Steel Queens coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. We've been in a bit of a rock and a hard place with the ladies' game, because every year, obviously, the questions get asked: why are we not doing more for it? Why are we not pushing it more? But there was such a spread of age categories within it that to try and get a team together without weakening the one or two teams that was there was very difficult. But again, the clubs seem to have been doing a great job to keep girls interested and keep them interested. And the fact that these new teams are propping up now is again testament to the hard work the clubs have done. And now we're seeing the girls fully integrated into the Scottish national programme as well, which is good. It used to kind of operate as a kind of third-party kind of satellite session, but it doesn't now. It's fully part of the programme. And yeah, it's great. It's great to see them. It's very, very difficult to keep players up in Scotland when they're seeing they get to a certain age and they're seeing the elite pathway into the women's league down in England, and we were just losing them all the time. Ruby Newland's example, and these kind of girls, they were just going down south. So now there's enough bodies there. It's important that we try and keep them up and strengthen our teams, and overall that'll strengthen their league as well. You don't want them all playing in the same place.
Yeah, I suppose the question, and on that front, kind of becomes, because of course necessity has kind of meant that the Steel Queens and the Sharks ladies have had to join the English league structure. The thing that I'm interested in hearing from your perspective, because of course the Sharks men's team kind of, and you and I and Martin have had this conversation in the past, kind of stepped up from One North into the national division, kind of out of necessity for the men's team. It kind of needed to kind of get away from stagnating, but we're seeing now a very marked improvement in the quality of the SNL. I think for a long time people kind of gave the SNL a bit of a side eye because the quality wasn't kind of there, and we're now seeing improved quality of juniors coming through, improved an improved amount of teams in the SNL. Obviously, not every team is quite there yet. There's still a couple sort of in the league, but kind of not quite at the same level as everybody else. We're seeing a rise up in women's hockey. Where does Scottish hockey kind of go in that kind of sense then? Because you've got teams that have kind of joined crossed border in senior sense from a necessity. Is the want to kind of let them come back? Is it to allow them to have kind of freedom with it? Where does it kind of sit? Because certainly I've had conversations with people wondering about, well, the Sharks are kind of doing quite well in the national, quite well established. Everybody's enjoyed having them, but does the Solway SNL team appear, for example? I think that's at that senior level. It's quite interesting to wonder where Scottish ice hockey sees that going.
Yeah, well, obviously I can't say too much about the stuff that's happening in Solway. But
there's my exclusive.
What I will say about the SNL is, and I think your description there was bang on. I think for years it was an aging league, and it was only going one way. But again, testament to some of the clubs: Aberdeen, Edinburgh Capitals, the Kestrels, and Fife. Paisley Pirates have done a great job. These teams have introduced youth into their teams and gave the players a chance. And what they're seeing by that is that these younger players are now taking a handle on the league, and it's probably went from an average age of high 20 to low 30s to probably 19 to 24, which is really good. And obviously there's still a sprinkling of veterans in there, and some quality older players. But I think the overall quality of that product is night and day compared to probably even 2 or 3 years ago. Now, I've watched a lot of games this year at Widnes, and I've been to a few other rinks watching NIHL 1 games, and I have to say I do think the top 4 or 5 teams in the SNL would give any of the NIHL 1 teams a game. I would love, in my personal opinion, with my cap off, is I would love to see more cross-border competition. I wouldn't want to put a name on it or say the teams have to play in this league or that league, but I'd love to see Blackburn, Billingham, Hull, Whitley playing Dundee, Edinburgh, Fife, Aberdeen, and I think that would make for a really interesting game, but also a really good product. Because these teams they can compete at that level for sure. In fact, I would probably say I actually think they would come out on top. I do.
Can't tell whether his cap was on or off for that answer, ladies
no,
and
my
gentlemen.
cap was off for that answer.
But obviously, as well, we saw that sort of a little cup sort of competition held between Edinburgh and Whitley, which people were really, really big on, really excited for. Edinburgh's actually speaking of the Capitals, of course, because I visited Edinburgh quite a while ago now, back in 2010, as kind of slowly before the wheels kind of came off the Capitals as an elite league organisation, and we obviously saw Murrayfield as an organisation kind of come back, and then the Capitals have kind of come back. Edinburgh's kind of been through the ringer a little bit as a hockey city over the last sort of decade and a half, and then we see around Christmas time, a game against North Ayr with 2,100 people in the building for SNL. I think that aside from obviously a massive congratulations to the Capitals and the Wild for being able to draw that many people into the building. Yeah, that was a big moment for a lot of the work that's been done in Scottish hockey over the last few years, it feels like.
Yeah, look, I think that's a big moment for the whole league rather than just Edinburgh. Obviously, Scott Neal's back at the helm there, and you're right, they have been through the ringer over the edge. But I think they've learned a big lesson from that. I think they're getting 1,000 bodies quite regular now. And the vast majority of their players are local between Edinburgh and probably Fife. I think it's the vast majority of their squad come from. And if you take the Aberdeen Lynx as well, I mean, Aberdeen Lynx sell out, like a sellout crowd for 99% of their games, which in any league is unheard of, So it's all down to their marketing. I do still think having homegrown local players in your team does make hitting those numbers a little bit easier, because people actually want to go and see people they know. They have a bit of an easier connection at that level. Whereas if you have a team of visitors or a team of people from all over the place, it doesn't really have that same connection. We were always quite lucky in Solway, where the vast majority of our squad was local, and then we had a couple of good players come in from here and there to boost us. But look, any team in any NHL national team, if you could tell them they would get 1,000 bodies on every single week guaranteed, they would take it. And there's a couple of SNL teams doing that, so hats off to them.
Yes, you mentioned about visitors coming in. I'm still surprised somebody didn't try to get Peter Gapper a British passport, but we'll leave that
I
one
didn't say I didn't fly.
It's very, very true. I won't repeat some of the things. I won't repeat some of the things he said to me in the last time I saw him. But but certainly, we talk about the fact. I mentioned about the fact about that sort of those cross-border bits and pieces. I don't know whether you need to have your hat on or hat off, and obviously you're not going to talk about kind of too much in the background. But Solway are the standalone men's organisation that takes part in England ice hockey competition.
Yep.
Has the club benefited in the way that you think, in the way you wanted it to, from not playing in the Scottish leagues and playing in the English leagues? And obviously, for people not familiar, Solway, of course, played in Scotland, played in the old Northern leagues, and came across, joined Division 1 North, got to a point where they were quite handily dominating Division 1 North, multiple time national champions in the at Division 1, and then stepped up into the national division. You've obviously been there at the heart of that, Jamie, alongside Martin Grubb, and that was before the ownership. You were there before the ownership changed to John Strange, and you're there now. Has Solway benefited in the way you thought it was going to?
Well, I think the short and easy answer to that is 100% yes. But if we take a step back, how could I put some detail onto that answer would be, we didn't jump from Scotland because we wanted to. We jumped from it because we needed more games for a start, and the SNLM was only one home, one and away, and they make a team sustainable. We needed more games. We need more bums on seats. So that was one deciding factor. When we went to England, we actually joined in Division 2. They made us start right at the bottom, and obviously we won that the first year and then got promoted up. We did rejoin the SNL a couple of years ago to get more games again when a couple of NHL 1 teams dropped out, and I think that kind of backs up. Yeah, I think that kind of backs up the fact that it was a good move for us, because I don't know the stats, but I know we didn't lose a game, and some of the scores weren't particularly healthy. We did use it to bed in some young guys, which was good. But I think that kind of backs up the fact that at that point, the NHL 1 league was a stronger league, and it was the right move for us and our club to do that. In terms of the National League, again, it's been an incredibly tough road, bumpy road, but with some huge successes along it as well. And it's again been a decision that we've never looked back on, never regretted, and I hope there's a team of that level in that building for many, many years to come. My big hope is that more teams join us, Anthony, if I'm honest. More teams from up this way push on, and that might be that over the years the SNL starts to develop to that level. Who knows? I don't know, but the easy answer to that question is yes. It was definitely the right decision for Solway to join, and I think we've proved that with the success we've had over the years.
In terms of other teams joining from Scotland into the national division, I think obviously we are both more than old enough to remember. Well, certainly before my time in British hockey, but things like Murrayfield, Dundee playing, whether it was in the old Heineken League, whether it was in the BNL, whether it's been the Elite League is obviously a British wide competition. Certainly, I think the issues that I've seen from the south of England is that increased travel has caused issues in terms of recruitment, because some players are loath with the balancing act of being a semi-professional athlete rather than a professional one, of making such travel. Whilst I would never turn down a side from Kirkcaldy, and I won't say which one because that would probably cause a few people to get very cross at me very quickly, or Dundee or Aberdeen or anywhere else across Scotland, it would probably result in quite a drastic shifting of how the National League is put together, particularly if we're staring down the fact of finally the rink in Basingstoke is being done and the Bison will hopefully be back at some point in the not too distant future. Not that Basingstoke doesn't have a habit of nicking decent Scottish players over the years as well. But how would that work? Because I think the concern of many people would be if too many of our friends in the north join, the logistics of a national division that potentially has 12, 14, dare we even dream 16 teams, how does that logistics work? And also, how do we not end up damaging potentially the SNL into that bargain if you lost in Edinburgh and Aberdeen or Kirkcaldy Kestrels, for example?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of bits to answer in that, right? So
yeah,
we'll start with the end part about loads of teams joining. The unfortunate thing is, I don't think it'll ever happen. I think if it was going to happen, it might be one or maybe two teams as a total max. And the reason I say that is Fife and Dundee would really struggle to ever do that because they have an elite league team in their building. So it's not potentially viable to be a second team in that rank. You need to be the main ones. That leaves Paisley playing at a Bray Head, excruciatingly high costs of operating a team at the current level. They do a great job. The club's been there for a long, long time, but I can't see them having aspirations of doing it ever. That leaves Aberdeen, who would probably do it at the drop of a hat, but I can't see any team anywhere agreeing to go there because it's just too far. It's another 4.5 hours, 5 hours past us on a bus. So that leaves Edinburgh. And again, if I'm honest, I don't think they've got any appetite for it in the near future or the short-term future anyway. And fair play to them, why would they? Because they're building a good product. They're pushing for trophies. They're getting 1,000 bodies on with minimal operating costs. So yeah, I mean, it maybe is just a bit of a pipe dream, that we get that. The flip side of that is, how would we make it work? Well, I don't think it would be that difficult. And actually, I think your Hulls, your Sheffields, your Leeds, and certainly us would welcome it, because you would just division it north and south. You would have crossover games. It would cut the operating costs and operating travel of all the northern teams, not just us, and do it that way. And then the third part, you mentioned about recruitment and travel. I'm not really sure that is a thing now. I think maybe in the initial conversations of us joining, there was a few players bumped and moaned about it. But if you look at the fixtures, if you take Solway as an example, we are so accommodating with teams. Like, they come up here and play a double header at home. We have an early face-off on the Sunday, and off they go to let them get down the road. Nobody else does that. We travel, and we always have done. And we'll travel Saturday, play it Saturday at home, travel to Sunday, Romford, Bristol, wherever we're going. And a couple of teams accommodate us, but so there's ways and means of doing it if it ever did happen. But if anything, I think it would probably be one team. But then it might open the door for another team in the north of England. Maybe a Blackburn, for example, or somebody like that. Who knows? I guess you could. There's loads of ways to look at it, but I don't think it would be that difficult with an extra one or two teams total circling about it. And actually, it's probably a good thing in the future. But right now, I don't think we have the quality of player to be able to field another team. I think recruitment's extremely difficult as it is, so I can't see it happening anytime soon.
Well, you talk about the quality of players, so let's look about how potentially we might improve that, because of course Scotland has, at least it is announced, so I haven't seen whether it's still going. Hopefully it still is, but that sort of exceptional sort of circumstance of letting 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds train up with seniors, that's something that happens in Scotland, doesn't happen in England. How has that gone, I suppose, would be the question, because we obviously heard that it was happening, but haven't heard, obviously not talked about greatly kind of what the ongoing knock-on effect of it has been. So from your perspective, how has that made an impact on Scottish hockey?
Yeah, so it was a twofold decision that I made. So number one was a training-based rule where an under-16 player could join a senior team for training, and then there was another part that the wording was quite specific, that prior to their 16th birthday, if we were deemed that they were a talent, and there's a risk assessment, and we have to get parents. Basically, the process is the parents have to agree, the head coach of the club needs to agree, the team coach needs to agree. They need to do a risk assessment at club level. Then it goes to the national programme coaches. They come back with feedback to me, and then ultimately I either say yes or no. And it's been a huge success, in my opinion. I think we've only, in the 18 months or the 2 years that it's been going, I think we've approved 7 or 8 players,
Okay.
right? So it's not, we're being very strict on it. It is an elite program, it is an elite pathway. And if it was more than that, I think questions would be raised that teams are just using it to boost their roster. And each of the players that have went, I think we rejected one player and then revisited 6 months' time and then approved them after we watched them a bit more. But it's been a huge success. These kids are getting game time. A couple of them are scoring goals. We've not had any injuries. We've not had any major penalties. We've not had any child protection issues. We've not had anything at all. And I'm being 100% honest here. Not one concern has been raised on any of these kids that we've put through, and every single one of them's now playing good minutes in that league, which is, to me, a resounding success and something that should be looked at everywhere. Because, I mean, I'm 47 now, and it doesn't feel that long ago, but I remember being 15 and sitting on the bench in the British Division 1 with the Vikings and getting a chance to train with these players and stuff. And another handful of guys, Matt and Grubb being one of them, Scott Plews, these kind of guys, like, when you were good enough, you were good enough back then. There was none of this, oh, well, he's not 16 for a day and a half, so he has to wait till next week to play. That's, what difference? What difference does it make? You could be 6'5" and 100 kilos at 14, or you might be 5'1" at 16. Like, so age is just a number. We have to look at their athletic ability, their mindset, their skill set, etc., and use that as a proper grading. And if they're good enough and they're strong enough and they're safe enough, then they should be pushed forward.
The thing that strikes me about that is 7 or 8 doesn't feel like a very, very large number, but actually, when you consider how many, you talked about the fact that particularly at those older age levels, that you've kind of lost this. That's the bit where rosters are still kind of a little bit short. Actually, if you've got sort of 2 or 3 of those 8 who are talented enough to the point where you feel that they can kind of step up, that's quite an impact you could make on an under 18s roster by chucking up a couple of younger kids or that sort of level. Dara, we obviously won't ask for names because that would be really, really horrible, and with that'll probably spook a few bits and pieces. But is that geographically, is that distribution of those 7 or 8? Is it?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 in Aberdeen. We've had 1 in Dundee. I think we've had 3 or 4 in Fife. 1 in North Ayr, 2 in North Ayr, sorry. 1 in Kilmarnock, and then the other couple were in Dumfries.
So really, fascinating to see as well that actually, with all due respect to Kilmarnock and North Ayr, who are at the bottom end of that SNL ladder, 2 of the sort of smaller teams as well. But actually, it's not just all concentrated around Kirkcaldy and Edinburgh. Actually, everybody's having that. It's fantastic to see that some of those younger guys who are at that level to where they can play up are getting that opportunity to play up. And actually, like you said we said right at the beginning about some of those youngsters from Dumfries, they're playing on a Widnes side that have found wins hard to come by. Yes, Kilmarnock and North Ayr found wins hard to come by. But if you're playing 15, 16, 17 minutes a night, you're not going to get worse at that age.
No, absolutely not. It's impossible to get worse. The boys, the kids that have been approved and that are going on to play now, they've hugely benefited from it, in my opinion. And they're playing. I was actually speaking to one of them at the weekend. He was playing D, and his D partner was Kyle Horn, right? Like, I know, and I did laugh and say I thought he had retired. I haven't spoke to him for a couple of months. But for a kid of that age to be able to share the ice and share the experience and learn from one of the best to do it, one of the best senior, British born and bred D-men that we've had in his day, you can't buy that. You can go to all the schools you want, all the hockey schools, do whatever you want, go abroad. You cannot buy what these kids are learning by hanging about with old veterans and learning the game properly as early as possible. For me, that's invaluable.
For folk who've not read the When the Music Stops Banners on the Walls piece about retiring, go back and read about Ross Murray's stories from having to put away the curling stones at Dumfries.
11 o'clock Thursday night.
As we're getting towards the end of our time, because I know you've got to go because of other commitments. But I will ask the question just because it's something It's something I've very, very briefly spoken to Martin Grubb about. But as I've got somebody on the record, the Dumfries Border Vikings, aside from being possibly one of the best names that British hockey has kind of lost over the years, tell folk about what it was like, because some of the stories I hear don't sound true. And I'm not expecting anybody to be libeled or accidentally needing a visit from the constabulary. But from what I hear, it was a bit of a high time for a lot of people.
I think most of the stories you've heard probably were true. It was a bit Wild West back then. I was really lucky, I was my son's age then, so I started training with them at 15. I left the school to concentrate on hockey, which is a great idea. Don't do that, kids. And although it worked out okay for me, and travelled the length and breadth of the country. We didn't have junior games, Milton Keynes, Chelmsford, Romford, Invicta, all these places, and had a whale of a time. But what I always go back to about that time was the talent that team had in terms of its import players and some of the best young British players at the time. I've never seen players like that since at that level. And when I compare the imports that we had at that level then compared to what I see every week in the NIHL, we were so lucky to see some of these guys back then. Your Rick Ferras, your Darcy Cahills, your Oleg Sinkoffs. There's a whole Steve Chartrand. Like, we had Vas Vasilenko, Dino Bauban, people like that, and Dumfries, and Craig Lyons was another one of my favourites. Vin Spo, like, there's a whole list of them. But it was an absolute. I mean, you were terrified as a 15 and 16-year-old. You were terrified going on these away trips. I mean, terrified and ultra excited. But I don't think I would have had the career in hockey that I did if it wasn't for those days. And obviously, when it was one of my best friends now, Bobby Haig, I ended up playing for him for 4 or 5 years in Blackburn. And I played, obviously, with John, his brother, and Dumfries, and he was absolutely lights out when he was, I think he was only 19, 20, I think, when he came to Dumfries. It was absolutely lights out. But as for the stories, I'll maybe buy a pint one day and tell you some of the good ones. But one of my favourite ones is actually the bus driver came out and the team bus wasn't the team bus wasn't there anymore because one of the players was driving it. But that's a whole different story.
And as you didn't say the name, we don't need to worry about saying allegedly or doing any other bits and pieces. I will finish off with two questions. One we do need to look towards Mrs. Thomson, your wife. Just explain to everybody very briefly just how much she does as well, because the amount of input she puts into hockey, both locally in Dumfries and nationally, almost makes you look positively unemployed by comparison, is my understanding.
Yeah, look, I never ever thought, when me and Leanne have been together our whole lives pretty much, but even when I was playing that, she would sit and have a wine in the bar, not really that care. But when Bailey started playing and stuff, she really got into it, as all mums do, because I was always busy and away with teams and still playing actually when he came, and then got into coaching. So she's the chairperson of the local club, has been for about 12 years now, the junior club here. And I probably actually don't tell her that enough, Anthony, but she does, the hours that she puts in on a weekly basis is pretty phenomenal and very unique, I think. I mean, I would say she probably does 50 hours a week on hockey stuff outside of work. And still finds time to run Bailey up and down to Widnes and watch his games and yeah, they're very, very lucky to have her in Dumfries. And I'm kind of pushing her. I hope we're coming to the end of that road now. We're going to be grandparents soon, not Bailey, our eldest daughter. So I think that might change our priorities a little bit. So when that comes, but yeah, her and her committee, Samantha Ray, Owen Ray's mum, our sister Lisa Calvert, and numerous others have been fantastic for that junior club. And if I'm honest, probably saved it when it came back for COVID, and it's now in the strongest it's ever been. So yeah, she does a great job.
We end with one last question, and like a lot of Scottish people, and I have to confess, I know I don't understand it myself, but like a lot of Scottish people, you are an avid golfer.
Yes,
I will give you like I like to do in a lot of these interviews. I will give you the horrible what if scenario. A round with Tiger Woods at the local golf club, or Solway Sharks national champions.
Oh, national champions. National champ. To be honest, mate, I love golf. Like, I play 3-4 times a week. Like, I love it. I'd probably give it up for that. So, yeah.
We're sorry, Tiger. Southwest Scotland is not for you. Apparently,
Yeah.
I'm sure the golf courses of Dumfries and Castle Douglas will be disappointed to hear it. But thank you very much for the time, Jamie. Jamie Thomson from the Solway Sharks and Scottish Ice Hockey. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Nice to see you again.